Hey everyone, this is the Atheist side, and today I'm going to have a look at a video from crossexamined.org that features Frank Turek's counter-arguments to some atheist objections. So, we're going to counter the counter-arguments. Let's dive right in.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Carter.
Hey, Carter.
And I'd very much like to begin by addressing your offensive moral law argument that without God as an objective moral standard, we atheists, those who do not have the influence of theism, would be Hitler-esque amoral beings.
Okay, let me stop right there because that's not the case. I never said that atheists can't be moral. I never said atheists don't know morality. In fact, atheists know morality just like everybody else. We know morality because it's written on our hearts. What I'm saying is that atheists can't justify morality. That's the point.
Frank doesn't get off to a strong start here. He says that atheists can be moral, but can't justify it, which is very wrong. Justifying morality, even as an atheist, is very simple. Consider the following situation. A society adopts the moral code of kill as many people as possible indiscriminately. Needless to say, it'd be very difficult for such a society to continue to exist for very long, as everyone would have just murdered each other. This is why we have morality. Things like don't kill and don't steal are essential components of a functioning society. Simply claiming that it originates from God is flawed in more aspects than that, however. Christianity came along somewhere around the 1st century AD. Now, according to Christians, this would be the beginning of morality, because you can't have morality without God. However, how on earth would societies have managed to live before the 1st century AD? The Egyptians and Romans, arguably some of the most successful civilizations ever, existed long before the founding of Christianity, not to mention the many civilizations before them. So, how would they have functioned without the Christian idea of God?
It's not a point about how you know the moral law. It's a point about why does the moral law exist?
I may return to address this, or the gentleman behind me may address it, but I'd really like to address your design argument.
Okay.
As I understood that you've argued that a painting or a creation, to use the term painting, implies a painter, or a design implies a designer. But I must ask, who designed God? And if no one designed God, if God is timeless, spaceless, and immaterial, and he existed eternally in an uncaused fashion, then why can't nature exist in the exact same way, in an eternal, uncaused, spaceless, timeless, immaterial fashion? Why can't our uncaused origins be as marvelous and precise as God, but be natural causes?
Excellent question, Carter. That's a very good question. You're right that we have two options here. Either the universe is the uncaused first cause, or something beyond the universe is the uncaused first cause. The problem is that all the evidence points to the fact that the universe is not the uncaused first cause. And I didn't have time to go through that evidence tonight. That was part one. But I'll give it to you very briefly in an acronym, SURGE, S-U-R-G-E.
Frank says here that all the evidence points to God with the SURGE acronym. So I wonder what the SURGE acronym is, and I'll be addressing every single letter, S-U-R-G-E, one by one.
S stands for the second law of thermodynamics, which says that the universe is running down. Well, if it's running down, somebody must have wound it up. We'd have no energy left right now if the universe was eternal.
First we have the S, which according to Frank stands for the second law of thermodynamics, which states that the universe is running down, or more accurately, moving towards chaos. He says this proves this was wound up, as how can something run down without it being wound up? This is wrong, however. Something running down doesn't prove it's been wound up, it just shows that it's been running down. A tree that grew on a hill and then falls over and rolls down hasn't been wound up, but it is still, pretty much literally, running down. This is because it grew in a place with a lot of potential energy, not because it was wound up.
The U stands for the fact that the universe is expanding. Edwin Hubble detected that back in 1929 and shows that everything came from a single point. a point actually of infinite density, the singularity, which is actually nothing. So the universe had a beginning.
Next we have the U, which stands for the fact that the universe is expanding, showing a beginning from a point of infinite density called the singularity. However, singularity isn't claimed to be the beginning of the universe. It's simply the point where physics gets so distorted that we can't look back any further. As a result, the expansion of the universe doesn't prove it had a beginning.
The R in surge stands for the radiation afterglow. That's the remnant heat discovered by Penzias and Wilson in 1965, which is literally the smoking gun to the Big Bang. There's heat, remnant heat from the Big Bang still out there, which shows that the universe had a beginning.
On to the R, which stands for radiation afterglow. Again, Frank makes the assumption that this means the universe had a beginning. However, this is simply remnant heat from the Big Bang, as he himself says, which makes this argument flawed in the same way I already discussed with the U.
The G in surge stands for the great galaxy seeds, which were very fine temperature variations in that radiation afterglow that allowed the galaxies to form in the early universe.
The G. Frank says this stands for the great galaxy seeds, basically tiny variations in density and heat right after the Big Bang. He says that if they had just been slightly different, galaxies wouldn't have formed, or at least not formed in this way, which is true. However, he doesn't make any other arguments with this, but seems to imply that the supposed creator fine-tuned it in this exact way. However, this argument is easily disproven, as this is a very big case of survivor's bias. We wouldn't be having this conversation if the galaxies didn't form. The universe could have thrown millions, if not billions, of attempts at the Big Bang, until finally the right conditions were met for us to exist.
And the E stands for Einstein's theory of general relativity, which shows that time, space, and matter are correlative, that they came into existence together, that space, time, and matter literally had a beginning.
I don't really know anything about general relativity or special relativity for that matter, so I'm definitely not qualified to try and discuss this point.
I believe that you're drawing a false dichotomy, because we do not know that the original cause was God. There is no reason to say that an intelligent designer was the first cause, the uncaused first cause that caused everything else. I do not have the training or expertise to refute surge science, and in fact I accept your conclusion that the Big Bang had a beginning and space, time, and matter came into existence from a point of origin. But we do not know that this point of origin is God. Calling it God is to make a false assumption. Another reason for the existence of everything might simply be that other dimensions had the power and the marvelousness and complexity to create a situation where where the Big Bang could be brought into existence and space, time, and matter could begin to exist without an intelligent designer having a hand.
Well, Carter, what you just described there is what we would call God. God is in another dimension that has the ability to bring these dimensions into existence. So if you want to call it another dimension, you can call it that, but that's exactly what we mean by God.
Frank says that you can call it another dimension, but it's just God. This is pretty ridiculous, however, and would imply that what Christians call God is just another universe or dimension. As far as we know, dimensions or universes aren't sentient. They can't choose to do anything, they just simply are. This doesn't at all fit the Christian idea of a God and completely ignores the possibility of other possible causes beside a different dimension or universe, assuming our universe wasn't the first cause uncaused.
But then why is there a theology? Why do we worship God? If he could easily be called another.
Excellent point. You don't have to worship God.
Oh yeah, you don't have to worship him, just know that you get sent to hell if you don't, Just a little caveat right there. Yeah, it's just eternal torture, not a big deal. You don't have to worship him.
You can do whatever you want. That's why you have free will. God loves you enough to give you free will. You can love him or reject him. That's up to you.
But on that point, you do have the free will to accept or reject God, but the obvious conclusion is that rejection of God will lead to eternal damnation in hell. So in reality, we do not really have the choice to accept or not to accept God. We must ultimately accept God, assuming we choose to avoid perdition.
Well, if you want to avoid, Well, let me back up for a second. There's only two possibilities if God exists. In eternity, you're going to be with him or you're not going to be with him, right? That's logically the only two options. If you want to be with him, you will seek him out and be with him. If you don't want to be with him, God will not force you into his presence against your will. In fact, let me make the objection stronger than what you're making it. You're very polite, but I debated an atheist who was a little bit more direct. And let me tell you, this man he's a good man. I like him. His name is Eddie Tabash. He's an attorney from Beverly Hills. We debated at University of Michigan a number of months ago. And he looked at me during the Q&A and he said, Frank, my mother was a survivor of the Holocaust. She lived an awful life. Somebody presented her with the gospel and she rejected it. Is she in hell right now? Whoa. I said, Eddie, I don't know where your mother is. I don't know if she made a profession of faith in her last moments, but if she didn't, then God will not force her into his presence against her will. God is too loving for that.
That's not love. That's sadism. Sending people to a realm of eternal torture because they decline to worship you is not love. It is a horrifying case of narcissism and sadism. If I were to randomly approach you on the street and demanded that you worship me because I created you without giving any evidence for this claim, you would reject it, right? Well, what if I then said that I would rip out all your fingernails one by one if you didn't worship me? This would be insanely sadistic, and yet this is basically what God does. Except it isn't a one-time thing, it's eternal torture.
And I asked the audience this question. In fact, I'll ask you as an audience this question. Ladies, is there anybody in here who's ever had a man pursue you and you did not want that man to pursue you? You did not want to date him. Anyone in here? Of course. In fact, some of you are going, yeah, he's sitting right next to me right now. He won't leave me alone. I said, okay, ladies, suppose this man continues to pursue you and continues to pursue you. And you say, look, I only like you as a friend. Ladies, why don't you just take the knife, stick it in, and turn it?
Ah yes, very Christian of you, Frank. Promoting murder. That's not worthy of hellfire, is it?
Because every man in here has heard this. I like you, but only as a friend. Well, suppose he continues to pursue you, continues to pursue you. And he gets to the point where he says, look, I love you so much, I'm going to force you to love me. Can he do that? No, he can't do that. Love, by definition, must be freely given. So if he truly did love you, what would he do? He would leave you alone. That's exactly what God does.
This analogy is completely wrong for the situation. Yes, in the analogy, the man should accept the rejection and give up. But this is not applicable at all with the situation with God. In this case, leaving them alone means that they get to be happy and that the guy, is going to have to look for someone else. With God, it's something completely different. With God, if God turns you away, you don't get to live a happier life. You get sent to eternal torture. You get sent to eternal torture. That is something very different from being left alone. Again, that is not love. That is insane narcissism and insane sadism.
He keeps sending us cards, letters, and flowers while we're here. And if we keep rejecting him, he gives us up to our own desires. And that ultimately what hell is. Hell is separation from God.
That is not what hell is. Hell is eternal torture. Yes, it's separation from God, but you gotta not forget the eternal torture part. And here we see the true problem that Frank is probably having here. He's stuck between defending the indefensible, hell, literal eternal torture, and questioning the unquestionable, his God. You can see this by the fact that he basically ignores the problem of hell. He says that it's just that, separation from God, and tries to ignore it as much as possible.
So you're free in hell. You can continue to reject God in hell, but you're confined to hell. In fact, hell is a quarantine of evil. That's what it is.
So basically, you are saying that atheists are evil, as they'll be going to hell. And that was the video. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's now clear why Frank's points fail. I've been the atheist side, and I'll see you all next time.